before, you should be able to be very familiar with those two terms, as well as what they mean when they're on their own. So the more point or the more specific part that I would like to focus on becomes this little combination, right? So when they have been put together, we need to understand, oh, how, right, are those two terms able to be merged? So that being said, right, is more about their connection or the, let's just say, relationship, right, that these two terms are having with one another. So Sandra already was on the right track, saying that if you have your context ready, in order to justify this one context, there might be multiple sentence structure that fit. Is everybody with me? Okay, to justify one context, right, there might be multiple sentence structure, right, that fit. However, not all contexts could be embodied or put through by one specific sentence structure. Or if we put it another way, right, vice versa, if we say one sentence structure could be used to justify multiple different contexts, but one sentence structure alone wouldn't be able to justify all contexts. Are we all good, everybody? And just this term, right, about context, we always say that it's related to keywords like a specific situation that you want it to make clear of, or it could be replaced by other words as well. For example, scenario. Do we remember those, everybody? Okay. Or on top of that, we also have words like vibe. So it's kind of giving people a certain atmosphere, a certain feeling, and that's what context is able to give you. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, so that being said, right, a specific situation, a specific scenario, a specific vibe, a specific atmosphere, the list could go long, but the point is we need, or in this case, I'm just going to ask this question to you guys. Let's just see how many people still remember. So sentence structure and context, which one comes first again? Crystal?
Context.
You're right, because? Crystal? You want to go on?
Because
why context, right, happens first?
Because the context gives like the information about what it's going to be.
Okay, very good. All right, and Sandra has a very high hand. Go ahead.
The context is basically the core. If we don't have the context, then we're not going to have the sentence structure. If we have the sentence structure, then we could still put the context in. And then the context, it's like what you're going to be talking about. And even if sentence structure, let's just say, didn't exist at all, then it would probably have a different name. But still, if there was no such thing as a sentence structure, then the context, it could still function, though it would be pretty long and very confusing, but still, it would still exist.
Now, that's a very good point. Okay, so saying that we need context first, and then we need a sentence structure second. Funda, was that a little hand up, or it wasn't? Let me know. Oh, okay, all right. So we need context first. We need sentence structure second, right? As what Sandra has put down, context is pretty much the core, right? You would want to, in this case, whenever you're writing, you would want to know what you would like to write first, and then start writing. Right, everybody? Because you need to think through this. If you haven't thought through this, very likely whatever that you are going to put down is going to be nonsense or lack of sense-making sentence structures. So in this case, right, it's more of like a refining process. So the context is this brain work, is this little brainstorm. So whenever you're writing down a particular sentence, you think about it, right? So, well, so far, is this the vibe that I want to give out? If you're writing, let's say, a story, and then you want to create a little suspense, right? Then if you are certain that, okay, the next part of my writing is going to be suspenseful, then you, from there, right, pick what sentence structure or what kind of layout of the writing is going to best fit your already determined context. Does that make sense to everybody? Context is not a term, all right, that's only in, let's say, poems or random readings or writings or fiction or whatever. It exists in basically all type of writing. So even this is academic, is expository, okay, or it's argumentative, or it's analytical. Well, there are so many different genres and types of academic essays out there. But whenever your writing is the best, if your context fits the sentence structure that you're choosing, and they work independently. Okay, does that make sense, everybody? So they both have their own thing to do, but when they come together, they becomes interdependent. Okay, so there's like two terms that I would like to, in this case, right, put down for everybody. So first of all, they're independent, right? Each of them that we talked about have their own thing to do, right? Sentence structure carries out certain things, whereas context is something else. And for that, right, I'm gonna save it here since everybody should be very familiar with it. Let me know though, if there's anything that you do want to clarify further, or I'm just gonna assume that everyone has a good understanding so far, but will feel free to raise your hand and ask any questions if you do feel like any of those concepts that we're talking about is still kind of blurry, because that's why we're here, and that's why we're always trying to do a little bit of the review. All right, everybody? So I'm just gonna carry on here. Another word that I'm going to put down is interdependent. Well, what does that mean? Those two terms might look close, right? Well, there are somewhat well, likewise to one another, but does anyone know their difference or their nuances? Have we heard about both of these terms before? Luke, by any chance?
No.
I'm sure that everybody knows what independent is. What about interdependent? Well, have people, oh, Sandra, yes, give a try.
Okay, so first rule of being a student, when in doubt, search Google. Okay, so Google has given me that interdependent is two things that rely on each other. So I suppose if we were to bring this into the independent clause or the interdependent clause in this case, then it would be those weird cases where the two clauses, like normally there's a however or but in there. So it's like saying that this sentence, when it's the independent clause, but when we read it, it doesn't actually make sense. But then the other one is like, it can't exist without the other one. So I think that might be it.
Yeah, I mean, for the second part that you said there, Sandra, that was on point. So interdependent here describes the relationships of sentence structure and context generally when they are mixed together, because one wouldn't make sense without the other. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay, so if you write something without a context in your mind, then pretty much you're selecting a random sentence structure, correct, everybody? That sentence structure could still work, and that sentence structure can still carry out a lot important information, but that's a random sentence structure because you pick it without having a context beforehand. So if you want to put them two together, you wouldn't want to do it or do one without knowing the other. And in this case, we have that order already laid out for everyone, right? So context usually happens first, whereas when you know what you're going to write about, you choose the relevant or the applicable sentence structure that exists out there. So this particular thing that we're talking about here, that context,